You are listening to the Enormocast.
Squama by Sportiva. A shoe for climbers who are not afraid to ascend. Climbing obsession.
Why are you so obsessed?
Squama. Squama vegan. Precision. Stability. Squama vegan. Skin-like.
Why are you so obsessed?
What would you do for the send?
What would you do for the send?
Squama by Sportiva. Squama.
What would you do for the send?
Elevate your sending with the Squama, and elevate your consciousness with the new Squama Vegan. All the sending without the animal-derived materials. Find the Squama at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. Squama.
What would you do for the send?
Well, folks, them holidays are behind us, and maybe you consecrated Mary Bird than the baby Jesus without so much as a wiggle in the hay. Or maybe you celebrated them candles lasting through an 8-day bivvy. Or perhaps you're old school, and you feasted and gambled and danced naked upon Saturn's fertile soil. But after all the gift-giving and receiving, you just didn't end up with what you really wanted, some sick gear from Black Diamond. So cash in them gift cards, return a sweater or two, eBay those bedroom slippers, and head over to blackdiamond.com or your favorite local shop and find literally everything you need for your next climbing adventure, including the Stoke. That's right, nobody has you covered head to toe, pad to piton, ultralight cam to comfy hand jam like Black Diamond. Rock climbing, ice climbing, bouldering, or looking fine as rosé wine at the gym, BD has the goods. They even still sell wired hexes for Pete's sake. If that doesn't say next year's white elephant, I don't know what does. So as you shake off the holiday hangover and set your sights on a fructious 2023, sow the seeds of adventure with some new gear from Black Diamond. The fruitcake's all gone, buckaroo. What are you waiting for?
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,006.
You
really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style.
Bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is February 6th, 2023, about 9 o'clock in the morning here in Colorado. And this is episode 257 of the Enormocast, which is TAPS 2023. No, just kidding. Haha. Can I interest you in a Chris Sharma instead? That's right. One of the white whales of the Enormocast. I have strapped myself Ahab-like to Chris Sharma, waving my hand as we dove through the waves deep, deep down into the life, the mind, the psyche of Chris Sharma. And I suspect there'll be some new listeners for this one because that's what happens when I have a big celebrity on, so welcome to the new listeners and to the faithful listeners. Yes, the TAPS episode has been delayed a little bit this year, I will admit. But as I mentioned on the last episode, one of the principals was waiting for his wife to bring forth life from her body, which she has done successfully. The life has been brought forth. Everything's good. Child is happy, healthy. Mom is happy, healthy. Actually, the funny thing about a little 7-pound hunk of baby is that you don't really actually know too much about what they're thinking. I mean, you can kind of tell if they're upset, certainly. But after that, happy, indifferent, they're kind of a little black box. You know what I'm saying? But he seems good. I guess we'll just say that. He seems like he's okay with what has happened to him. Maybe he's like a little Werner Herzog in there. He's just like, the world is chaos. I wish to return to the womb. I don't know. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, TAPS coming up. It's scheduled. Just hold your horses. And in the meantime, let's talk about Chris Sharma. Yes, I've been trying to do an interview, obviously, with Chris Sharma for, 12 years. How long has this podcast been going on? We've come close another couple times. But you know what? And I find this occasionally with the people who took a while to get on the show. It couldn't have happened at a better time. You know, if I'd have interviewed him 10 years ago, less maturity, a lot of things have happened since then that have changed him in really profound ways, and I wouldn't have heard about all that. And also, what happened with this one is we did end up face-to-face, which, you know, is kind of not as common as it once was on the podcast, so that was a real pleasure as well. We were in a hotel room in Boulder, Colorado, was down there for an event, and Chris was in town, and we got to make this one happen. So, you know, I just feel like it happened at the right time, and I'm really happy with what we got. And I've been thinking about Chris. I mean, I think most of us do most days, at least when we're falling asleep. There's a moment at least where Chris Sharma crosses our mind as climbers, you know, some more than others. But, you know, he really is sort of like one of the most beloved figures in all of climbing, I think worldwide, actually. There's very little controversy that's ever followed Chris. He's never really pulled any total asshole moves or anything like that. He's a little bit unassailable in a lot of ways. I mean, there was the weed thing where he like lost his podium spot because of some THC on board, but we don't even care about that. We like him more because of that. And besides, history's caught up with Chris Sharma. You know, unless you live in one of those cruel states in the U.S., I mean, it's either decriminalized or it's legal. And there's a lot of places that still like to throw people in jail for it. I think it has a lot to do with money. But yeah, it's moving away from all that. So what has he done besides inspire us? And I think at least climbers of a generation maybe a little bit below me, I mean, they can cite videos of his posters they had on their wall as being like one of the reasons they wanted to climb, or at least wanted to climb hard. And then there's the Ladura Dura thing. I mean, come on. Dude just like gives away one of his crowning achievements. Let some curly-headed upstart from the Czech Republic come over and snake it happily. Almost happily. We get into it in the interview. But nevertheless, pretty awesome career. The other thing I realized about Chris Sharma, and I kind of like just glanced through, you know, recent years of his social media and stuff, is that Chris Sharma has never really told us how to go climbing. And I think that's great. Like, does Chris Sharma train? Yeah, I think he trains. I assume he trains. I assume he's used coaches and things. He doesn't tell us about that. He doesn't tell us how to hangboard. He doesn't tell us how to do things to become him. He's just out there climbing and spreading sort of that good Sharma Zen-like charm throughout his social media. You know, lately he's had things to promote, and maybe that's like the most controversial thing, is that he actually became, you know, someone who's trying to financially secure his future with climbing gyms, and now this show, The Climb. Maybe The Climb is finally Chris Sharma's controversy, because I think deep in climbing, people have been wondering what it was for and why their hero from 2004 suddenly did this reality show. But as we talk about in this interview, we can't keep Chris Sharma in amber at the point at which we were first inspired by him, whether it was on Realization or Ladura Dura. Those things are old now, 20 years, 10 years. He's moving forward. We do talk about The Climb on this interview. It's why he was in town, so it comes up. But mostly this is a solid Enormocast-like interview. We get into his motivations, his background, his inspirations. Good, deep, fun interview with Chris Sharma, a very jet-lagged Chris Sharma, actually. He almost wiggled off the hook. He was about ready to be like, hey, man, I'm too jet-lagged. In fact, he said that. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to come over anyway. Let's just talk about it. And then he quickly switched his focus. I wasn't going to let him off, dude. Because, once a Chris Sharma goes back underwater, you may never see him again. He may never surface for you, to belabor the Melville analogy. All right, let's get to it. A conversation with our champion, our ambassador, Chris Sharma. Like we're doing this.
Yeah, man, me too.
I know you and I have sort of discussed doing this, and you're such a busy person, and we have mutual friends, and you've been on the run out, but to actually then finally pin it down face to face is a real pleasure and an honor in a lot of ways. So appreciate your time.
Yeah,
big time.
Of course, man. It's good. I'm happy we made it happen finally as well.
Right. And we'll put the disclaimer on that you are extraordinarily jet lagged.
Yeah, cut me a bit of slack. But no, I'm stoked, man.
I don't know. I'm excited about that actually, because that mood you're in when you're like kind of punchy and jet lag could be good podcasting. So
maybe
let's see how this goes.
We'll find out.
One of our mutual friends that we just talked to and is a friend of yours in Barcelona, Bruce Anderson. We're going to give him a shout out here.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah. So
love you, man.
I kind of wanted to frame something along the lines of your friendship with Bruce. And with your life, it's so busy. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people want pieces of your time. Like, here I am in your hotel room. What does it mean to have like a friend like that? He's an old California dude there in Barcelona. Frame it in terms of what friendship means to you.
Well, yeah, man, I think one of the interesting things that I've taken away from, I guess, the pandemic, but, just maybe life in general, is like how precious friendships are, right? Mm-hmm. It has been like some crazy years, and especially, during the whole pandemic period. I mean, this is kind of like finally getting back into the groove of my typical lifestyle, where I would come back to the US like 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. But there was like a 3-year period where I just was in Spain. Mm-hmm. And it was really kind of like marked like a before and after in my life, because I've lived in Spain for like the last 15 years, basically. But as much as I have like, adapted to my life there and integrated into the culture, I've always, really held on to my California roots, And so, yeah, having a friend from California in Barcelona that I've been able to connect with on a different level, that, I have a really good community and base of friends over there. But, there's just something about having a friend from California that comes from, the world of climbing from like, the 90s, and that, we can relate on a lot of different levels.
Sure.
Going, from being homesick for the east side of the Sierras, or just, connecting on a lot of things. And so it's, I don't know, I think this year, like after we've gone through that pandemic phase, like we had this crazy period where we opened up 2 big climbing gyms
right.
in like a 10-month period. And then I went right into this, filming this whole show. So it was like this 2.5-year period of just like really intense experience that kind of, was amazing. It was like filled with so much growth and learning. When you step out of your comfort zone, that's when, all of that growth does happen. But once I was able to get through all of that, this whole last year, I've been kind of just prioritizing climbing, friendships, and family. And then, obviously like whatever, work I have to do. But I've been really trying to like keep that as like my compass, in my life, And so, yeah, it's cool. You know, I'm out here in the US now and taking that opportunity to meet up with some friends of mine. I'm going to meet up with my old friend Obi Carrion,
Right.
and Josh and Brett Lowell and Nate Gold, and we're going to go down to Waco for a week. And of course, I'm psyched to go climbing in Waco because, you know, it's one of the places where I got my start, and it's an amazing place. But really, it's just kind of like an excuse to go and connect with some old friends. And yeah, it's like as we go through life, you know, I think realize how precious those sort of friendships are when you know people, you know, over 20 years and you are still able to like connect. And because there's also lots of people in our life that we've lost touch with. Right. And so maybe it's a little like nostalgic or something like that, but I guess, no, it's cool to kind of take a moment to appreciate those things, because I think, we all get swept up into our routines in our lives, especially when we start having kids. And then, you know, 2, 3, 4, suddenly 10 years have gone by, and then, you know, you lose touch with people. And so,
it's interesting because we were talking about the last time I was in Spain and in our reference to our kids, because we have a kid that's about the same age. You have 2 though.
Yeah.
But, and then as we were walking up here, I'm like, yeah, I guess it has been 5 or 6 years since I've been to Spain to see our mutual friend Bruce. And I was like, Jesus, that just happened like that.
Yeah.
You know, and the pandemic kind of like just took 2 years out of it and just put them into a black hole anyway. So,
I mean, it might sound kind of depressing for like younger people listening to this, like we're just like getting older, but I think
half this podcast is about getting older. People are totally used to it.
But it's like also like having kids and seeing them grow up. I mean, like my daughter, she's almost 7 now.
Right.
And it's like, you know, you just are able to witness time go by in a different way, right? Where it's like in your own life, the years kind of blend together. But when you see it, you know, see your child like go from like a little baby into like a kid that, you know, you're having like full on conversations with, and, you know, yeah, you start to realize like how fast time goes by. And that's been like an interesting thing for me, because I kind of like ventured out of my comfort zone to explore these other challenges and experiences in my life, like with building this business, you know, Sharma Climbing in Spain. And then obviously with this TV show, The Climb, like, you know, so I think that was really important for me to like develop other like facets of my life. But it also made me realize like how much I love rock climbing and how much like that's just like at my core. With that, like take stock of the things that you really value in life. And it's like, man, I love climbing, and I'm at this point where I'm still feel really like, you know, at the top of my game.
Nice.
But at the same time, like I see like that it's like this, there's like a finiteness more than in the past. And so just kind of like more sense of urgency to like, okay, like if I'm psyched, now is the time to freaking go for it. It's not next year or the year after. It's now.
I always use this Dylan Thomas quote, do not go gently into that good night. And it's, you know, it's a poem all about like, don't just give up and die. Like you got to keep going. And like, it's so exciting to hear that. And I kind of knew that about your climbing and your goals right now, to have that reinvigoration. And that's like a question I always have for, not just climbers that are getting older, but also someone who is such a high level performer. I mean, you were the best in the world, continue to be the best, one of the best in the world. How do you keep that like fight and that psych? And like, it's great to hear that you're still firing on those levels of like, I got projects that I need to do.
I mean, I'm like in a really, really cool phase in my climbing relationship, or my relationship with climbing. It's like, obviously like whatever, the torch or the baton has been passed like a while ago. And I've taken that bit of space to, you know, kind of establish some other things, you know, like a family and like a business, and which is, I think was really important to take a step back and do other things. But it's really interesting because I think in the past I questioned a bit, like with La Dura Dura, when I'm no longer the best climber, what's it going to be like? A lot of climbing is about this sense of progression, right? And you always want to keep pushing it up a notch. And like, so what happens when you stop progressing like numerically and stuff? And so I don't know, it's been really cool just to like really explore on a personal side. Because of course, I mean, I'm trying things that are that are still like cutting edge and, 15C, and maybe, maybe I'll even get up to like a 15D. Who knows? Like that would be pretty cool, but it's not really like trying to like play that game of like trying to be the best anymore.
Sure.
It's just like very personal. And that was one of the like things that I took away that was really cool with the Dura Dura back, which was like 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Which was cool was that, Adam Ondra did the climb before me, whatever, was crowned, the new best climber, however you want to say it. But, and it was for me, like the realization with that was like, all right, that's cool. I still want to do that route. It was just kind of like a very cool, like confirmation that I was climbing, for the right reasons, like it was like this personal journey. One of the interesting examples, and to each their own, like everyone has their own way of doing life. Right. But, Jerry Moffatt, was like such an inspiration for me as a kid growing up, and had the opportunity to climb with him, on a number of occasions. And, he was also at one point the best climber in the world. And I think when that stopped, he basically lost interest and he quit. And I feel like, I don't know, to each their own. There's a lot, right. I mean, it's totally fair. And there's a lot of different things to explore in life. So it's totally legit. One of the interesting tangents about Jerry that's really interesting though. So he basically quit climbing after that. And he got really into surfing. And then a few years ago, he had this really bad surfing accident. And he broke his neck in the Canary Islands surfing. And, I don't know if he had to get like vertebrae like fused together, and he was lucky he wasn't paralyzed. Obviously had like, nerve damage and stuff like that. And to like alleviate his back and all this stuff, he actually like climbing became a therapy for him. And so he was like, he took a trip to Barcelona to climb in our gym, and like and he was like back into climbing. And it was pretty neat just to see like, even, or like our friend Bruce, right? He quit for 10 years and then found himself in Barcelona at our gym and, got re-stoked. So I think it's probably important, if you're going to climb for 30, 40 years, it's super natural to have like periods where, the intensity level is going to vary. It's not going to be like always super hardcore. And that's just natural. But I think it's very cool to see for all of us in that way, like how climbing is just like woven into like the fabric of our, of who we are. It's like our central thing that connects, all of these other experiences, whether it be friendships or our jobs or, or I don't know, on so many different levels. And so it's, I trip out on it because climbing has been this thing I've done since I was 12 years old, and it's taken me all over the world. And it's also like facilitated all this amazing, like I've learned so much through climbing that's not just about climbing, right? Of course, there are like the things you learn about yourself while on the wall and projecting and all that stuff, but it's also like traveling, learning new languages. I mean, with this whole gym enterprise that we started in Spain, I mean, it's crazy, man. I've learned so much about business. It's been such a crazy last 7 years, diving headfirst into, it's like been literally a crash course in all of those things. And it's like, I'm dealing with lawyers and architects and banks and all this stuff. It's like all in Spanish. And so it's interesting, like none of that stuff is climbing, but it's all like brought to me through climbing. And so I think there was a point where I felt like I needed to also find out who I was outside of climbing.
Mm-hmm.
There was periods in my life when, like I did after I'd climbed biography in France in 2001, like it was a really important moment for me to kind of take a step back. And, I'd kind of been like this, and I was this like child-phenom, and climbing was kind of thrust into the limelight at a very young age and put in this role of, put up on a pedestal. And I think it was really important for me to like take a step back. I went to Asia and I spent time like meditating and kind of like seeing what it was like away from it. And I think it's also important, it makes you appreciate it. And that's definitely, I think, one of the things, like being a father, like, having these other responsibilities, like it makes me hungry, it makes me miss it. I mean, I think the times when even though I look back on it kind of like, I can't complain about it at all, but to be just a pure professional climber and dedicate yourself 100% of the time, I feel like it's not a very balanced lifestyle. And I see it all the time. I see people that I remember living in the Pyrenees, in San Llorenç de Montgay. It's like the quintessential climber's dream to wake up and look outside of your bedroom window to beautiful limestone cliffs. But, you get complacent, you take it for granted. You're like, oh, it's a little bit humid today, or it's a little bit, not quite right. And, you don't quite appreciate it. And then suddenly when you don't have it that easily, it's like you feel really hungry for it. So for me, it's been good to kind of like, just kind of embrace that journey a little bit, where it's taken me a little bit away, but then also like coming back in, like even deeper, and that's like the cool thing. Fall back in love with climbing. I think that's one of like the really cool things. But I will say that, in the past, it was a lot easier to like dip in, dip out.
Yeah.
But now, like that I'm in my 40s,
fitness wise,
it's not that easy. And so it's like now there's like a lot more awareness and appreciation. Like I remember I went 6 months to India and Japan, and I was just like meditating in like monasteries and stuff. And then I went and like flew straight to the Phoenix bouldering contest and got first place. And and now it's like you take 6 months off and like you're like starting from scratch again. And so it's like climbing came very easily to me back then, and I don't think I really appreciated it that much. And now that it's like, you feel a little more mortal, that it's like you really value that and value the feeling of feeling fit. And so yeah, it's cool, kind of like come full circle. And now I'm just like, just want to freaking climb, and I want to hang out with my friends and spend time with my family and basically do all the things I've always done. Not much has changed, but it's just kind of like in a new focus, a new kind of just like, I think there's a lot of BS that we maybe, it's very common that we are not that appreciative of things in the present moment. I guess as you age, then you like start to become aware of like, and you appreciate those things more. And so it's been cool of just kind of like being more just aware of like how freaking awesome that we're, that I get to go climb in Sirana. That's like my home crag. And yeah. And then, like I was saying, to have these friendships that I've built over, so many years, and get to like, have this community of friends around the world. It's very special. And climbing, it's like an amazing thing that, kind of joins all that. So.
Yeah, I've wondered about, because you're, I guess maybe pre Alex Honnold, you were the biggest celebrity, at least in American climbing, right, for a long, long time. And, celebrity on climbing level is, whatever. It's, it's not superstar athlete, football player type of celebrity, but it's always been curious, like what effect that had on you. And that was one of my questions, and why I started with the friendship thing. I'm like, there is some level of people kind of wanting a piece of you. And I'm like, well, so what does he do to make sure he gathers his friends around him when he needs them and moving through? Have you ever felt, what's it been like in terms of, you're a kid phenom, you again are maybe for a long time were maybe the most famous climber in the world until a certain somebody free soloed El Cap. But, what was that like? Was that part of your meditation takeoff, like period of trying to kind of figure out who you were in the climbing world?
Yeah. I think I've been blessed by just like having good people around me, from a young age, like the people that I started climbing with, basically, right. Like my good friends, Andy Pouvel and Sterling Keane, they were like my first, like kind of like big brothers or mentors, and they were like very soulful people that always kind of like kept me like, grounded, and I think there was a period of time when I guess I don't know, maybe I struggled with some of that a little bit. And I think it's kind of a normal thing of like, you know, how to make sense of all that. But one of the things that I really vividly remember, because I mean, climbing in general is very, as amazing as it is and how beautiful as it is also like very selfish, right? It's like about, you know, me and my experience. And of course we love to like dress it up and that it's like, you know, communing with nature and all that stuff. And it is, but it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's also like, it's very much all about yourself. And there's something very beautiful about that, of course, and trying to kind of keep it pure in a way. And so I always held very close to me like that, trying to like have that level of authenticity. I think especially I had like a pretty big knee injury when I was 17. And so that really like set me on like a new path. Up until then, I was like, the world was my oyster and like everything was opening up. And then suddenly like the doors slammed shut in a way. And it made me really reflect on all that. And so I really came back to climbing when I was 18 in a very much more meditative way, I guess, because I had spent a lot of time just like rehabbing, you know, in these random little beach cliffs and just kind of really discovering climbing away from trying to be someone. You know, I had that project biography and I had tried it when I was 16 and I was out in France with Tommy Caldwell and we were like hitchhiking around southern France and it's crazy to be 16 and doing that. But
yeah.
But so I like at that time, and that was the cutting edge futuristic project of our era, right? And I had this kind of this idea or this ideal, like I want to do it. I want to go back and do that, but I want to do it just in a really pure way. And I want to just go there with no cameras. I want to just like go there and just like have it be like a super personal experience. And I remember talking with my dad about that. And he's always been a really important person in my life, very grounding. He was like, no, you should go with your camera crew out there and document that. And with that, you can share climbing with others. You can make it more than just about yourself. You can make it for others too. And so it was really, that like began this kind of like awakening of like, trying to like keep it legit and pure for myself, but also like transform it in a way that I can also like use it as kind of like an offer. Like what I use my climbing as like an offering to like the climbing community or, you know, so I was like kind of embracing fame or whatever, embracing that limelight, but trying to like use it in this way of like trying to like transmit, like not like doing anything super profound, but just transmit like good vibes, right. You know? And I think that always came through pretty strong. And I think that's like why I guess I've been, you know, pretty well loved in the climbing world. And I'm super, super grateful for that. And, you know, I just, so it's very cool, like climbing as a profession, because obviously, you know, you have to make a living, but it's also like beyond that, I think we all need a way to feel like we, you know, contribute in some way to society. And so it's like that I've been, you know, given that chance to do that through climbing. It's like, I mean, it's pretty special. And at this point now it's like, I mean, whatever. I mean, if people are psyched to watch me climb, like I'm that's cool. Like I'm happy to climb and share that with people. If not, that's cool too. Like I'm still going to go climbing. That's still what I love. And, I mean, I think it's like, now it's kind of ingrained in me, combining like storytelling with going climbing. And I think it's interesting because it's like, you know, doing these amazing, you know, first ascents or climbing these places. I think it's comparable to, like a musician or something, right? Like they can compose like a masterpiece piece of music, but if it's not recorded anywhere, you know, no one can enjoy it, right? And that's like a critical piece of the process, is actually somehow documenting that. Mm-hmm. And that allows a lot of people to enjoy it, and it goes from just being a personal thing to something you can share with the world. And so I think I love going climbing when no one's there and no cameras are there, but it's also cool to be able to, I mean, shoot, man, like, it is super satisfying when people come up to me and they're like,
Had the poster.
yeah, or they saw king lions and that's what got them
Right.
psyched to start climbing. Like, and it's super rewarding. And so like, I'm just, it's very cool to be able to, combine those things.
Right. So when you just mentioned being such a young phenom, and I've remarked on this a lot, how that your generation and your era was kind of, I mean, not the beginning of that, but we're sort of used to these young climbers just being so good. And I've had a part of your cohort was Katie Brown. She's been on the show and we talked about that. And,
yeah, I mean, it was the beginning. Like when
Tommy was so young and you were young.
Tommy, Katie, Beth, and I, when it was like 1995 at the Berkeley Nationals, when that was like this crazy, it was kind of like a revolution, because up until, I mean, that was, all the climbers of, the late 80s, early 90s, and like the sport climbing revolution. And we were the first, kids that really came on the scene and were at a maybe even superior level than the adults, right?
It's wild because you're competing against, like, it's so weird to think about, but you were competing against like people in their like late 20s. Like that's just like bizarre now to think about it.
Yeah.
That there would be people there. But one of the things that's always, I don't care if it's another sport, if it's gymnastics, or if it's, when there's a phenomenon kid or a young person, it's like, we're looking for a formula, like, well, where did that come from? Because, and you're a particular climber. I mean, you've lasted, and it's been your legacy to have started so young. And when I've talked to people on the show, like climbers can run a lot of times. Part of the reason they went climbing is to run away from their roots, like their upbringing, they didn't like it, and or where they were born or whatever. So can I ask you a little bit about like, basically the influence of your parents? 'Cause you just mentioned your father. Your mother was a dancer. I know you lost her young, but tell me what you took from them. You just mentioned some grounding from your father. If you can elaborate, where is that legacy in you? That what they did?
So my mom took me to the climbing gym when I was 12. I was always climbing stuff, trees and whatnot. And a friend of hers who climbed a little bit saw me, and he was like, you should take him to the climbing gym. And so I think I went to City Rock back. It was like one of the first gyms in the US. And there they told me that a new gym was going to open in Santa Cruz. And so at that point, I went down there, like I asked for like a job if I could like sweep the floors or something. And
did they say yes?
No, I don't think so. I didn't. But it was a trip because
that guy still is like, I can't believe I told Chris Sharma he couldn't have a job.
But no, it's like I had like a paper route, and I like saved up, and I like bought my shoes and membership, and it was like all kind of came from me. It was after that, but like my parents were like, my mom was very she was a dancer, she was an artist. My father was a surfer. They were both yogis, and so when they got married, they took the name Sharma, which is a Sanskrit name. They were studying with Baba Haridas in Mount Madonna Center in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so that's definitely like a big part of my background. And yeah, they were just super supportive of me. And so I guess, I don't know, I think it's an interesting question, to think about like what impact they had on me. And thinking about now having kids, right? Mm-hmm. And how we influence them. And I had this conversation with Yuji the other day as well, which was super interesting. But I think like my mom was very supportive of me just embracing this, embracing climbing. It was I was like 14 years old, and I, won that competition and was like getting invited to go to all these events around the world. And it was this interesting moment because I was this, I just started high school, and I was getting pulled away to, all of these different things for climbing. And she actually found this, this dude that he used to be a principal at a high school, and he basically saw that kids don't all learn in the same way. Some learn better in the classroom, but he basically set himself up as a registered high school and would like give you a high school diploma based on some essays and stuff. My mom was like, you should do this. You shouldn't be here in school. Like, you need to go pursue this. And my dad was more skeptical for sure. But I think about that sometimes, and, you know, my mom, you know, kind of really supporting me on like, just like following my path. Neither of them were climbers, but they were both like very, I guess, you know, pretty free spirit in that sense. Like, I supplemented some of my classes with like junior college, community college, but I had 4-day weekends so I could travel more. And then, suddenly it's like, I was 16 and me and Tommy were like hitchhiking around, you know, southern France by ourselves, you know, we were teenagers. And so it's pretty wild. You know, I think we'll see how being a parent, to think about that now, it's kind of crazy, but you know, it's like that, this experience of climbing has been like my education in so many ways, of just like, you know, going through the world and like the school of life, and, you know, the interactions and the, you know, different situations that I found myself in, and just kind of embracing things. Right. And so it's like, for example, with this TV show, you know, I never imagined myself in this situation, but it's like when a door opens, you know, it's like you can either walk through it or not, but it's like, I don't know. I think you got to embrace things when they come. And it's like, not, obviously there's always like hard decisions and some sacrifices that you have to make, but I think you have to like embrace the things that come in front of you in life. And so, yeah, it's pretty wild, like where life has taken me, you know, like, you know, living in Europe. And I think it's definitely like connected to that initial support from my mother, just kind of like giving me just like the green light to like, you know, follow my passion. And it's really interesting, you know, this then like flipping that around now, being a parent. And, you know, I was climbing with Yuji Hirayama the other day in Sirana, and it was really special. You know, he's a pretty good friend of mine. Hadn't seen him in several years since, you know, the whole pandemic. And we were the only people climbing in all of Sirana. It was pouring down rain, and we met up we were like, let's go climb. We're like, I don't know if we're going to be able to, let's just go try to find some dry rock. And it was pretty epic, because we're like, you know, like that's what climbing is all about. You know, like Yuji is like such a legend. We've both been climbing for so long, and both like just so passionate to go out climbing, share with each other. And he's someone that I've always looked up to, because he's 54. So he is like from the generation before me. Climbing competitions were born. He was, you know, at the inception of all of that. He's just a very inspiring, just like, he is like the embodiment of what a climbing ambassador, you know, an ambassador of sport is for me. He is the example that I always hold up. And one of the things we're talking about is like this whole balance of being a father and also being a climber, and how to balance those things. And, you know, oftentimes climbing takes us away from being at home with our kids, right? And that's like something that I struggle with now. You know, there's like a level of guilt sometimes, like when I'm away and I'm doing something that's often, you know, it's pretty selfish. It's like for me, because it's, you know, and, you know, Yuji's experienced that even deeper, because he's had to travel for long periods of time. And I'm in a very fortunate situation in that I live in Catalonia, and I can go, you know, I've found a way to kind of like integrate things in a way. So his kids are 23 and 25. His son is a professional soccer player, and his daughter is a professional dancer. So it's like all three of them are like very untraditional paths of life, right? And so he was to explain to me, he's like, somehow, and it's hard to identify exactly what, but somehow like his example of him following his passion as a climber instilled certain values on his kids about what it means to like follow your dreams, right? And I think that's something that maybe when I was a kid, like my mom supported me, my dad was more cautious, because, you know, just like leaving high school early and doing something totally unconventional, like climbing felt like a pretty big risk, you know, and when you also want to see like stability for your kids and at the same time, I don't know, it's cool. And I'm really curious in that sense, like what my kids will do. And it same goes, for me, like Jason is someone I really look up to as a father, and had that challenge of following his dreams as an actor and trying to balance that with fatherhood. And at the same time, yeah, like that is like the ultimate example to your kids of like how to like live your life as well, like how to follow your dreams. That being said, like I really want to be there with my kids, and I think it's really hard for me to imagine, like for filming this TV show, there was one point we filmed for like 4 months, and there was a couple periods, it was like over a month where I didn't get to see them. And I don't know, like as much as I would love to do some expeditions around the world, like I feel like I'm pretty happy to be able to kind of try to integrate that as much as possible and combine, family and climbing, and just kind of like, it's interesting because I'm like an extreme weekend warrior, It's like I go for the like day trips.
Right.
That's like, I'm always in a hurry. I'm always just like trying to squeeze everything in, but it's cool. I mean, that's like the thing that I'm really appreciative to where we live is that, living in a place like Catalonia, like where we live in Gavà, which is right near Barcelona. We're right by the airport. And so it's all about just like, doing these day trips, once in a while, taking a few climbing trips, but there's point in life for everything, right? For like, I think it's really important to travel, and, maybe in the context of like a professional athlete, it's important to like do certain things, like, climb in different countries and this and that. But I think for just like really fine tuning your craft, you also need to be in one place to do that. And so I'm really just kind of pretty happy where I'm at,
right.
that I'm able to find this balance with family and climbing. And I mean, it sounds easy, but it's like, I think, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know what I'm talking about. It's like, it's one of the most challenging things. And that was, for me, taking a bit of time away from climbing to set up, create a family and business was very challenging to not have that free time. More so than most people, I think, because as a pro climber, you have just like, so much freedom, like go wherever I wanted, whenever. And so when you have that taken away from you, it's kind of, and I'd be like, changing diapers and watching my friends out, traveling the world. And, there was some moments of FOMO for sure, but then
it all transforms eventually back too, because your kids will get independent again, and you'll be, you'll have a lot more choices to make then as far as your own free time, because they may not even want to hang out with you. You'll be forcing themselves upon them as teenagers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing about what you're talking about is that, Spain is this place you embraced. I think like you were part of putting it on the world stage as far as what it's become as a destination climbing area for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
the
so.
focus, like when you did Realization, was France, and like, oh, I want to go to France to climb. I want to go to the Verdun. I want to go to Seyouz to climb. And then I don't know when it happened, but there was this huge shift over to a lot of these places.
I think it was
in
it was
Spain.
connected. I mean, I think, Danny Andrade played a really important part of that. And then, when I went there and met up with him and I got super inspired and ended up staying there, I think that was like a paradigm shift in climbing. I mean, I think it's really very interesting to discuss this right now because, from when I started climbing in 1993 till 2004 or 2005 or something, I mean, the French were like the dominant force. It's incredible. They were such masters of climbing. I mean, they were, and they still are. But I mean, in that period of time, they were they were so superior, in competition climbing, on rock climbing, in sport climbing, when Gilbert Trudeau came and established To Bolt and Not to Be and Just Do It and Smith Rocks. That was like the backdrop of climbing that I grew up in. It's just interesting to see like the generational like evolution of things and like how things kind of ebb and flow. And I don't know exactly when that changed, but yeah, maybe it was somewhere around when I did Realization or Biography, right? It was like right around 2000, 2001, but it was like American climbing started really like rising up to the top level. And then, yeah, Spain became like the hot destination spot for, high-end sport climbing. It's really interesting for me now to see with, obviously you have so many amazing climbers out these days. There's too many to name off, at one time, but I'm really inspired by Seb Buen.
Yeah, Seb was. Yeah. I was going to get to that in here too, because I mean, he just did, the connection up there at Clark Mountain on Jumbo Love.
So it's like, historically, you've put that into perspective. So back in the day when Gilbert Trudeau from France came and established the hardest route in America with To Bolt or Not to Be, and then with Just Do It. And then, it kind of flipped over where I came and I established, an American established the hardest route in the world
in France.
And then now it's like we're reliving that in a new era with Seb coming over and putting up the hardest route in the US. And it's super cool, right? Like I think climbing, it's so amazing how international it is. And yeah, I think it's interesting to see like how different influences have interacted and, influenced each other. It's probably similar to like music, right? Like how it's gone from different places and impacted different genres. But, and I think Seb in particular, he's super inspiring because, you have all of these amazing climbers and athletes, but Seb really inspires me because, he's going out and he's finding these king lines, right? Like that's what it's always been about for me, is finding these very beautiful things. And you can see the things that he's chosen to climb, they stand out. They're amazing, stunning, iconic pieces of rock. And I think that's unique, because most of the top climbers aren't doing that quite in the same way. And so
it's hard to define like what the ingredient is, but there's like Seb's got this ingredient that I think makes him stand out. I mean, he's obviously, the ingredient is that he's an incredible climber and incredibly strong, but there's, like you said, there's lots of people like that. So there's this little magic thing, and you had it, that
I still got it, man.
Yeah. Sorry. Do you need a nap? Do we need a nap?
Don't count me out yet, man. I know I'm tired.
I don't want to push you too hard because you're in your 40s now. We've been going for a while here. But yeah, I mean, had it. Sorry. Just fucking dissed Chris Sharma on my podcast. This is going to be in history. But yeah, and like the ingredient, and I've talked at length with a lot of people about this, like what that ingredient is that, to me, and maybe it's a personal thing too, but I think obviously he's making a splash on the world stage. Like, what is it that makes someone like that so intriguing when another climber who climbs super hard is, in my mind, more of a flash in the pan? And it's this desire that he has. And then also I love how he has a foot in history too. He, this whole thing that he does with going out and, sending these old routes like Agincourt and like, and he's just like, God, that was hard. Like, I love that video of him doing that stuff. But
no, it's incredible. I mean, to see all of these different characters that, over the last 30 years of like when climbing became, high end sport climbing, bouldering really kind of like took hold and as, one of the main disciplines in climbing. I think there's definitely like a bigger gene pool, but I'm just still blown away by guys like Ben Moon and Jerry Moffat and, like guys like my good friend Mark Lemenestrel, Fred Nicole, Boone Speed. Like, I mean, I feel like these are all characters in climbing that were climbing at the top level in the early 90s that, I mean, they were climbing fucking hard. Ron Kauk, I feel really grateful that I got to climb with all of those guys. And I was kind of right in this, interim between generations. And I was the little kid, but I got a chance to climb with all these guys. And so that's always like,
Yeah, it's
something I've been really proud about.
What you're talking about the pool is interesting because I had Scotty Franklin on here, and he talked about just that's even a previous generation to the guys you're talking about.
Well, he was Scott Franklin was similar.
Yeah.
How old is Scott now? He must be like
in
50s.
Yeah. But the thing was is like he talked about how like they would travel around and it was like they would go to Bukes and then there would be Wolfgang and it's like this little crew because sport climbing was so new as well. They would just see each other everywhere because that's where you would go to climb hard. Mm-hmm. And there was like kind of a lot more limited places. I mean, Spain didn't even exist as a climbing area at that point. And so, yeah, it's just cool. This like talent pool has grown to be pretty huge.
Yeah.
But it felt really tight, in the past of like who was making waves. They all knew each other. They all climbed together.
Yeah. I think it's pretty cool that I feel like it's almost like lineages or something,
mm-hmm.
but like there's definitely like this like transmission, of like
mm-hmm.
like for me, like getting to climb with all those guys back in the day, like I don't know, it's like I feel like you're connected to the history of our sport, and I feel super honored to have put my grain of sand in the bucket as well. And
because you have no perspective when you're that little kid and you're climbing with these greats that you will someday, put it back in the bucket, so to speak.
But it's just cool, like to think that, it is going to be an interesting next 20 years of our sport, see how things evolve, but see how things have gone from, looking at, the California Stone Masters, for example, and like, I feel so privileged that I got to climb, with Ron Kauk and, Dean Feidelman is a good friend of mine,
mm-hmm.
and getting to climb with Dean Potter, and he's a bit of a different era, but just I'm kind of like a direct descendant from those guys in a way. It's like Ron Kauk started climbing in Castle Rock, which is right where I started bouldering, and it's just and Yabo was there, and so it's just very cool. Like there is like a direct line of it's very, very cool to feel that kind of connection into the history of our sport and get to kind of be a part of that too. It's pretty special.
There's so many topics to go with here talking to you. I mean, we could do hours and hours, but we don't have hours and hours. So one of the things I think that was really pivotal in your life, obviously, because it led you to Spain, to wanting to live there, was showing up in Mallorca and finding this deep water soloing scene and building on what was there. You've mentioned that as being, that's why I'm in Spain now, is because of my dip into there. And then we just watched the final episode of The Climb last night. That's why I'm here in Boulder and why you're here in Boulder as well. This television show that you produced or helped create, however it worked out semantically, but it starts in Mallorca, ends in Mallorca. And, again, your life changed when you found Mallorca. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the show, but also incorporate how important it was for you to put that in there. I mean, it's exciting footage and as it always has been, but.
Yeah, well, we could talk a lot about the show, and it was an amazing opportunity that, kind of manifested itself with Jason and myself.
And let me ask you that. Like, the idea, was it like literally like you guys shooting the shit, or did someone come to you? Like, what was the germ of that?
I mean, it started, so Jason and I reconnected in Barcelona, and at this point we just, we really, really connected, and was like, let's do something. I'm who I am, you're who you are. Like, let's go film some rad shit. Let's go do something cool together. And then we were talking with some other people of different ways that we could, manifest that. And it kind of just came out through this competition show. And I think it was, it was this fine balance of like, it was a great way to like keep the ball rolling, to have this competition. But ultimately, like, what our main goal was just to share our passion for climbing. And I think that was like gave a way to like keep things flowing. But yeah, it was like our ultimate goal was just to like, and also with the climbers too, it's like, regardless of whoever won, it's like I wanted to really instill in them what climbing is for me, you know, and so being able to take them on kind of this almost like pilgrimage of these different places in Spain that have been super pivotal for me in my life in climbing was very cool. And so literally it's like I went after climbing biography, like I didn't really know where to take climbing for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Mallorca and it like totally revolutionized my vision for what I wanted to do. And I found Espontas, and that, you know, I wanted to find something like biography, but over the water, something of that scale. And that, you know, led me to spend tons of time there and became close friends with Miguel Riera, who's the kind of the founder of Mallorcan Ciclobloc. And then from there, I was curious to get back into sport climbing. And I went from there, I took the boat over and I went to Siurana and went and climbed La Rambla. And then from there, I went up to, you know, ended up moving over to Catalonia, and I lived in Sant Llorenç de Montgai, where all the contestants, you know, they stayed at my house, right? And so it was very like close to my own personal journey in climbing. So to kind of, I think watching that last episode was pretty special last night and it was really cool to see the reaction from everyone. But I think you could feel how authentic it was for all of us. You know, when you see Jason talk about, you know, his passion for climbing, and all of us, you know, it's like it's very real. And of course, there's these other elements where it's this big production for HBO Max, and there's all this other stuff involved. But really, the core of it is like it's like friendship and love of climbing, and wanting to celebrate those things. And so it's cool to see that really kind of become like the lead pillar of the whole thing, right? I think that really shined through, obviously, with Jason, myself, but also with Megan, and then also with the climbers, and the camaraderie that they had was amazing to see that. You know, I don't think anyone knew exactly how that was going to all, you know, unfold, and they all became so tight knit, and it was kind of like a big social experiment in a lot of ways, you know, and to see like the kind of like the true values of our sport, like stand strong through all of that stuff, and kind of stand the test of Hollywood. And it was a dance, you know what I mean? Like to walk that line, and for me, like I just focused on that side of it. There was a lot of people involved. There was a lot of amazing storytellers, a lot of amazing professionals that are the best at what they do, but none of them have the perspective of climbing in the way that I do. So that was what I focused on. Just like, I'm not going to do all this stuff that I'm not good at. I'm going to just focus on like making this the most authentic as possible, climbing wise, and trying to transmit that, and trying to stay like real to myself, because I feel like, I mean, it's a fine balance to suddenly be in a position to be in like a reality TV show host, and like, well, yeah, it could have gone south pretty easily, you know, like it could have like been something that like I really regret, you know. So
I mean, was there, let's just say, like you toss yourself into this, you know, this thing that's famously can chew people up, spit it out. You're in Hollywood now. It's a big production, not in Hollywood, you know, physically, but all this money, all this stuff that, you know, it has to happen, and you've got all these influences. I mean, were there moments during it where you were like, God, this feels like it can get out of control? Like, you know, you have a meditation practice. You're famous for kind of calmly looking at the world, but was it hard to not get nervous and swept up in this thing with this many people and executives all the way up through HBO? And
it was it was a unique challenge for sure. It was a unique challenge, and like, I mean, one of the things is that I've, aside from being like role of host, which was a whole new experience for me, but I was, you know, of the executive team. You know, I was one of the executive producers of this, and it's like I've never worn that hat, and so I'm with like, you know, with these people that are like professional executive producers, and I think for me that was a really new role to take, to be in. And I mean, let's face it, I'm I'm a climber, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that's what I like to go climb. And I mean, I'm excited to learn these new skills and stuff. But for me, like, to suddenly be on that level where it's like, it was up to me to toe the line in that realm of climbing, and no one else could do that there. And so we were like this 80-person crew, and you have all these different cooks in the kitchen, and sometimes, like, you know, having to, like, you know, I don't know, put my foot down certain times, you know, and like, you're like, we can't do it like this.
Right.
We have to do it like that.
Right.
And then sometimes even like having to like use the, you know, golden wild card, be like, you know, use Jason's name in there to, like, you know, put a little extra weight on to my words.
Well, I was going to ask you that, like, because he, you know, you talked about your strengths, and he's a climber, but he's obviously an extraordinarily successful actor, has done gigantic movies. So did you lean on that? Like,
well, like his acting,
yeah.
but also like his just, I mean, professionally, like he's, I mean, a producer, and,
Right.
you know, I mean, it's really impressive to see how, you know, how much he's got going on. And I mean, he's a passionate storyteller. But yeah, one of the things that Jason's like, you know, if there is something, because Jason couldn't be, I mean, he had a million things going on. He was there for some of the time, but then I was holding the fort down for us, you know? And I think the last thing that either of us wanted was like for this to come off in a cheesy way,
Sure.
but obviously that was a risk. And so, I mean, one of the times Jason's like, you know, if you ever don't feel good about something, just like feel free to, like, you know, let them know that, you know, like, you can speak on my behalf,
right.
basically, you know, like,
he's your muscle.
Yeah.
Literally.
And because, like, I mean, I think they took him more seriously than they took me, I think, understandably. Right.
Right.
But I think,
well,
it was a cool experience on, you know, for everyone in that sense. Like, you know, the reality was this was a show, and the other people in the team had made other, you know, reality shows or whatever, but this show about climbing, no one had made it. And this was like a big experiment, and it was pretty nerve wracking to see like how it all unfolded, and like that I mean, that how it unfolded the way it did in the competition sense. You know, any competition, you know, like if the routes aren't set properly, it could be a total disaster. The fact that it was men and women competing together, you know, I feel like there was a lot of like potential things that, you know, could have gone wrong, and maybe it wouldn't have worked out quite as well. So, so I'm excited that it seems to have been received pretty well, and I would be super excited to get a second season. Yeah. To just like keep building off of that, because I feel like there's
now,
like,
you know what you're doing.
Now we all know. I mean,
what's good, what's
bad. It was crazy because like the first episode, like that was literally like my very first day ever doing that, and so it was cool. Like, I think probably you could see too, like as the episodes progress, like we got more and more comfortable at our roles, and so it was cool. Like I was saying, like life gives you these chances to learn new skills, and it was new for me to not be like the talent as a climber. That's always been, I'll do little interviews here and there, but like let my climbing speak for itself, right? Yeah. And this was unique in that way.
So, you know, we've all seen what Hollywood can do to climbing, you know, which must have been one of your worries, like how far away from the core of it are we going to get? Like, are we going to have bolt guns? You know, all those sorts of things. But
it would still be awesome, huh? Still waiting for one of those, huh?
But were you like, okay, so you guys finished filming. Was it a typical thing where you didn't really see the result until it showed up?
Well, so
like how involved?
First of all, like one of the really important things to note was that we brought Brett Lowell in. Mm-hmm. You know, Brett's like one of my best friends. Him and his brother Josh, been working with them since I was a kid.
The Sender guys.
But they, you know, filmed the Dawn Wall, they filmed King Lines. You know, in my opinion, Brett's like the best climbing videographer on the planet, and he has the most experience. Literally, he's been there on all of my most important sends. I mean, he's someone you should have on this podcast, because he was on the Dawn Wall for 19 days when Tommy and Kevin did it. He's been there for like very pivotal moments in climbing over the last 20 something years. So, but having him there, I felt had my right hand man of like, you know, he's going to help us hold this thing together as well, which which he ended up wearing. I mean, he ended up stepping into the role of director at some point, and even beyond that, like helping me select the routes for the climbers. But then, yeah, so after it was done, I was involved in post, but from a distance, so I would like view edits, and I would, and then I would have to do some voiceover here and there. And then we would meet and discuss, things that needed changing and stuff like that. I think at some point I got a little bit burnt out on it.
Right.
And I was just like, it's going to be what it's going to be,
Sure.
And so I think I kind of, luckily also like the team from RXR, it's like the agency I work with, they helped out a lot with that stuff as well. Of just like proofreading and, just like making sure that what we were doing wasn't going to look and be like embarrassing and
sure.
and a disaster, right? So and yeah, it's like there's obvious things that we could keep making better, but I think for me it was like a huge, like it was very cool to just see the reaction of climbers, because it just kind of like made me like really, it was a sense of relief, but then also like it was just very, very satisfying to see the sense of like pride in the core audience that watched it last night, that they felt good about it, and other climbers that that mean a lot to me. Their opinions mean a lot to me. That I mean, you're always going to get some people that are going to criticize things, but it's seemed like it worked out. So
I'm talking to core climbers with this. This is, I just had a conversation with somebody like, oh, it sounds really interesting. I'm like, yeah, it's super core. Like, I don't care if non-climbers are listening to this, frankly. I mean, I love that they are, some of them, but we want you, it's like, we want you in amber. We want you, I think a lot of times the community wants you to just be the old Chris Sharma that like goes and sends hard. And, that's all we want to think about. But for you, we've been talking about your progression in here. We've been talking about you progressing to having a family and being a business person. And then this show like fits into it. But tell me about that. Tell me about the decision to make this show as far as, again, your progression as a climber, but also as a person and how your life is. Because you know what I mean? Like we'd rather you just stayed at Oleana and kept sending hard or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cool thing is that like, I mean, since we finished filming in February last year, that's all I've been doing is climbing.
Nice.
And so, like I was telling you, there's nothing better than diving back in when you've been away for a while. I've been involved in many different productions over the years, and it sounds cliche, but it's like you're always trying to like take it up a notch, and this amazing opportunity came my way with, my good friend Jason, and it's just like, step it up a big notch. And so, yeah, it's like, what are you going to do? Like, no, I'm just going to, no, I think you have to like, you have to embrace, these other things. And I think, I don't know who told me this a long time ago, but like life is filled with all of these very interesting side trips, that you don't expect. But oftentimes are some of the most interesting things that happen to us, So,
yeah, I mean, it was a risky thing to do, and I totally appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that you felt that, you wanted it to stay true, but again, I just think about the way those systems work and how, again, it can spin out of your hands and out of your control. And looking at your life again,
the thing is though, like if that stuff happens, and I don't think that should like prevent you from not trying stuff.
Right.
It's like, you could invest a whole season or 2 full seasons in a route and not do it, but does that mean you shouldn't try it? It was a bit of a risk, but at the same time, it's like,
Well, I find it interesting too, though, that the nexus of you and Jason, I mean, that made it happen. Like, I can't imagine it would have turned out the same way if, if you were on your own, for example. And we did an episode on the Run Out where we had, I think it was a bonus, whatever. We talked about like celebrity climbers. Here's these people dipping in, dipping out over the years. Dave Lee Roth, like from Van Halen, like climbed with Coke and all those sorts of things. And we landed on Jason as being like, I think it's all like super legit, like, because it's not always right with Hollywood guys, and he's super legit. But then, like I said, he brought this other weight to it, and this other skill set to it, and I can't imagine it would have turned out the same if people had just come to you by yourself.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously, Jason's a very big deal in that world, and so getting to like team up was very, very cool. It enabled us to do something on this scale, and I'm super grateful. I mean, he's a great friend. He really is a great friend. And like it's one of the things we keep coming back to is like those friendships. Are very special. And for Jason too, it's like I think one of the things we're both only children, and so like our friends are like our family. And so I really appreciate his friendship. But yeah, as far as climbing goes, I mean, he's probably more core than most climbers out there. And back in the day, he was a climbing bum. He ended up crashing at my buddy Jorge Visser's house.
Oh, sure.
And, Jorge was a great climbing photographer back in the day on film. And he had all of his slides in his basement of when we went and shot photos on Biography. These like very historical slides, which since then I don't know if they were destroyed in a fire or something like that. But Jason, when he was a climbing bum, he stole one of Jorge Visser's slides of me on Biography, and he still has it. And so it's like, it's like that kind of like level of coreness, that he and that he treasures that sort of thing. It's pretty. I think it illustrates his level of passion for climbing. And
there's also kind of this like interesting, I don't know, it's almost a gap in the media or whatever, after La Dura Dura, you're in Spain, you're leading up to you're getting married, you're having kids, you're building these gyms, like, but all the while you're climbing, and you're climbing hard, and you're putting up these routes that are wicked hard and around Spain. So tell me about a moment that maybe a climbing moment for you, or a route that maybe we don't know about so much, but that fell into a very special place for you outside of the pantheon.
I mean, there's a lot of them to choose from. I mean, I think two that just come into my mind, Bon Combat. It's like a 9B that I put up. And the cool thing about that route, aside from it being an amazing climb, was after La Dura Dura, it was kind of like the end of my time in Spain. I ended up moving back to the US for about a year. I was in California trying to like figure my shit out. And, I was like back living with my dad. I didn't have a car or anything like that. And ended up meeting Jimena, my wife, who's Venezuelan, but her father's from Spain. And so we had this joint connection to Catalonia. And so we ended up choosing Barcelona to like, let's try this out, try out a life together in Barcelona. And so it was like a big experiment to like, but also like destiny kind of like bring me back to Catalonia. And, but this time in Barcelona, and I was very reluctant of like living in a city, and that route was that crag, and it's in Bon Combat is in Cova d'Ossa, which is 40 minutes from Barcelona. And that was like, that's what made it all click, because suddenly I had this amazing project, and it like combining, I guess, kind of like rediscovering climbing this way of like being in an urban setting and then dipping out and going out into nature, and then kind of like appreciating that contrast more. That was pretty special, to like reinvent my experience of climbing through that whole perspective. And, I think there's something very cool about being in the climbing areas, but then also going back and not being in there and kind of living this other life. And that's kind of like that route was what kind of like was able to like fuse all those things together. And then just recently, I went back to, it had been 3 years since I'd been in California since the pandemic. And I had this photo shoot for Prana in Bishop in October. And actually I had some like anxiety a little bit of like, what's it going to feel like? Am I going to go back to my home and feel out of place? because 3 years is a long time, and it was amazing. I went back to Bishop and it was like this amazing feeling of just like being like in my power spot again, being with some of my closest friends. And, I went up to Pine Creek Canyon and there's that iconic Route Ecstasy that was put up, I think it was like in 1990 by Tommy Herbert, beautiful arete. And that's where when I lived in Bishop, I lived in Rovana, the base of that canyon. And so Brett Lowell and we rented a little house in like the little mining community there. And that's when I did all the climbing in the buttermilks. And that was like end of 1999 or something. And so going back to the Pine Creek, and it's like the classic experience of going back to a place you've been to many times and like seeing it in a new way and looking at that arete and looking at the right side of the arete and like, maybe that could be a new line. And so I climbed this route, the same arete, but on the right side. And it's this amazing climb that I think will become like a modern classic. It's kind of like the dream catcher of the East Side or something like that. And it just kind of like just came, just like manifested itself. It was incredible. I was only there for like 3 days and I was curious about that. And I went and was able to like bolt it and climb it. But for me, like coming back to California after 3 years and coming back to like my power spot in the Owens Valley and feeling just like welcomed back into like that place. And with that experience too, like with my friends there, but also with, a route like that kind of just like, it's like a flower that just like opened up for me, like, right there. It was just like kind of like I don't know, it's kind of just like very meaningful and kind of a sign of just like, very kind of special moment.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Chris for sitting down, making it happen, coming out of the deep jet lag to get a great interview done. And also a quick shout out to Tyler Wilcutt at RXR. Agents are supposed to remain behind the scenes, but Tyler's own climbing exploits deserve an Enormocast one of these days. And of course, everybody's been asking me, hey, when's Momoa coming on? Couldn't Chris get you Momoa? No, I don't think he could, actually. But in case, Jason, you tuned in for Chris's episode, you know what Alex Honnold says? If you're a climber, you pretty much got to do the Enormocast. And for the rest of you, since I've got you sort of in that ecstatic, sweaty glow of the aftermath of a Chris Sharma interview, sitting there smoking a cig or whatever you got to do to relax now, or you had to pull the car over to wipe the dampness off your forehead, this would be a perfect time to go to enormocast.com and click that donate button. Free content is not free to make, and though the sponsors go a long way to pay for the show, donations help out a lot too. What do you get for donating? Nothing. Just the satisfaction of making sure someone gets paid for the work that they do, because the whole catalog's out there for free. Over 257 episodes, actually, with the extras. Okay, tap's coming up, I promise. Don't forget to check your knots.
Come on. Subtle, subtle, subtle. Come on, squeeze, man. You gotta squeeze. Boom. Yeah, done.
Get up. Come on, man.
Done, dude. Come on.
Come on.
Tops a jug, dude. Come on. Jug, dude. Jug.